Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Maxwell Peara, former leveraged fin analyst at JP Morgan, talks about how he broke into JP initially as a credit analyst coming out of Fordham. He also covers how he managed to transition to the front office in LevFin and why he left to pursue his dream of playing tennis professionally. Enjoy. All right, Max, thanks for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So it'd be great if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Sure. I graduated from Fordham University back in 2015. Worked in credit risk for my first 2 years at JP Morgan, transitioned into leveraged finance in the general industries group thereafter. And then this past February, March, I recently quit my job to pursue professional tennis as a career.
Professional tennis. Awesome. So we'll get to that. Let's go all the way back first, starting kind
Sounds
of
good.
When you
The
were
beginning.
Well, not the beginning, but let's start back at Fordham. So you're there, you're in the city. You're not actually a business major though. You're a finance major with a minor in
Finance major, yeah.
science. Is that right? And you did really well there. So was it always was finance and Wall Street always kind of in the picture?
No, to put it quite bluntly. To be quite honest, for me, I had a background in tennis. I went to online high school. I traveled, Europe and South America playing junior tournaments. So most of my high school experience was tennis focused. And then when I went to college, it was sort of a shell shock of, okay, what now? Because my plan had always been tennis first and then school, but this sort of threw a wrench in it all.
Why did you change? Why didn't you just continue the tennis?
So at about 16, 17, I was decent. About 500-ish in the world in juniors, but I wasn't sort of getting the results I wanted. Also, it's fairly expensive, you can imagine. So the burden on my parents, it just didn't feel like I was going to make it then.
Yep.
So transitioning to, getting a scholarship, going through the college route, getting education.
Made sense.
So yeah, and then finance was, my entire tennis team was all business majors. My dad was in finance, so it was sort of like, hey, everyone around me did it. So I was just like, this is interesting. This is a new field. This is curious. So I sort of was.
Where are your parents from? Am I picking up an accent or no?
You are, but I'm from England, born and raised. My parents are actually both American. They got shipped to England before I was born for my dad's work. He worked at Prudential and then Lehman before it went down.
Yeah.
But they shipped me over to London in that span. So I was born and raised in England.
Awesome. Very interesting background. So
a little different.
You're obviously an amazing player. You're ranked around 500 in the world, but you're obviously to make real money, you got to be top in the world. So
to clarify, I was 500 in juniors.
In juniors,
okay. Yeah, just to clarify. I want to be 500 in professional. But for perspective, it costs around 40 to 50 grand. Maybe you could do 30 grand a year for travel, equipment, whatever, for professional athlete, professional tennis player. You probably need to be in the top 300, maybe 250 to sort of hit that. I'm making maybe 5-10K. I don't know the exact numbers, but once you get to about 200, you're probably making a little bit of money. You have a coach traveling with you.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like golf and other sports where it's individual, where it's just an exponential growth as you go through the rankings. But the first 1,500 in the world to 300, you make nothing. You make nothing.
So your parents were like, look, you're really good, but I think college as a backdrop makes sense. So everything flipped from tennis to So were you not a good high school student, or were you?
Sure. Let's put it that way. I got a 3. I think I graduated a 3.231.
Horrible considering you didn't really care.
No, but it was also homeschool. So the standard of, that 3.1, 3.2, if you compare it to some of the prep schools of New York or the prep schools of other, cities, I wouldn't think that I'd still get a 3.2 if I went to high school at the time.
Mm-hmm.
SAT, I think I was 1300-ish. So again, not awful, but
Yeah.
it wasn't my focus at all.
But you're clearly a sharp guy. You ended up getting into Fordham. Was it mostly it's tennis? Is that how you got in, or is it mostly
Yeah,
I mean, you would get in probably though with the 1300 SAT and get some good.
I passed enough to get in education with my grades. Tennis was sort of the route that led me to go to that school. And then also transitioning from tennis, I was like, I wanted to go to university for education rather than pick a school that has a little bit better of a tennis program.
Right. And so you were in New York.
Yep.
And you kind of the best place to be. You're at a good school there. Tell me, so all of your teammates are in finance and business, so they're kind of influencing you. Like, you got to do this.
Yeah.
They're all going to bulge brackets or to
Yeah, no, they pretty much like. Let's see. My roommate went to Goldman, then JP.
Mm-hmm.
My other teammate, who was my year, went to Morgan Stanley. Another one went to Morgan Stanley. Another one went to Wells Fargo. Like, they all, at least half of within a year of me graduated and went to, if not investment banking, sales and trading, or leverage finance.
Is the path for athletes like that are at the upper echelon or, college athlete, do you feel like there's that connection with the alum of that sport that helps you? Like, are you getting recruited, or do you feel like just the kids in tennis were just good students too?
Like,
do you feel like the reason they're also successful, I mean, are they going into front office investment banking jobs, or are they going into
half and half. Half the team went front office, half the team didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, coming from Fordham, and if we want to go that sort of route, if you compare that to some of the names of schools that are front office roles in these banks, Fordham is definitely lower on the totem pole.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Like, when I was in LevFin, it was Duke and UVA had like a huge presence.
Yeah.
Fordham was like, there was me and I think one other person on my floor out of like 200 people. So it's just sort of like, I don't know if it was more just the tennis itself, or that tennis attracts people as a whole who are a little more academic focused. Because I will say that in college tennis and other teams, I did notice while I was playing, most of the other teams that we played against, most of the people were in business majors. Very few other tennis players I met were non-business majors.
But business is, to be fair,
broad. Yeah.
Business isn't the easiest or the hardest major, right? But you did a minor in computer science.
I did.
So you get some props for that. Okay, so tell me a little bit about just the process. Like, did you get internships, the typical finance going through Fordham, and then tell me a little bit about like the recruiting process and how that works.
Sure. So I interned with JP in credit my junior senior year.
Mm-hmm.
The internship itself, there was some case competition that JP Morgan hosted.
Yeah.
At Fordham, and they did it at a few other New York City schools.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they have the same, other banks do the same sort of process. My team ended up winning, and the 3 or 4 of us who were on the team got interviews for credit risk through that process. So I sort of lucked into the internship in the sense of I really only applied to 2 internships, and one of them was by default because of the case competition.
But why did you only apply to 2? Just because you got it early on?
Yeah, I got the case competition started pre-interview season.
Got it.
So I already knew the internship was already occurring.
Is that a tricky way for them to get ahead of everything else? They call it a case competition, but then they're recruiting kids that they want.
Honestly, it wouldn't shock me, because I feel like every single year when I look back, there's something new, or I hear from a freshman friend or like a teammate who's like, yeah, they started recruiting a month earlier and a month earlier and a month. It's like every year it just happens earlier and earlier and earlier. It's absolutely insane.
It really is, man. It's like now where diversity recruiting used to happen like sophomore year, it's like happening freshman year, and now accelerated recruiting is happening sophomore year. Like, these kids don't even know what they want. They're like 19, 20 years old. They're like, you want to be an investment banker? Like, come join us. Anyways, so you're there, you're kind of, I'll say luck into this internship, but you still have to perform on the job. Tell me what it was like on that first summer.
It was tough. Besides odd high school kind of jobs that you do where it's like, you sit at a shop and watch over it, or you bartend, or that kind of stuff. Yeah. This was a formal job in a bank, suit, tie, meetings, 70, 80-hour work weeks. Like, it's a complete difference of, I've never really experienced anything like it,
Was that a shock? The hours, was that the hardest part, or was putting on a suit the hardest part?
I don't like wearing a suit personally.
Hey, do I? Look, can you tell? I'm in like a t-shirt.
I love the hat, by the way.
Thanks.
But no, the hours weren't. The hours are okay. The opinion on the hours, I think, when I first went to internship, and the internship feeling of the hours is very different than the job, because the internship was a sprint. It's like, there's a time limit, it's going to end.
Yeah.
There's sort of a goal in place, so you can kind of put the hours in the past and go, whatever, they don't really matter, and just grind through it.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing that I personally had was just, I came from an athletic background. Being in such a formal environment was my most challenging thing. I just wasn't comfortable always being, for lack of better phrasing, prim and proper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you felt like a little bit of pressure. This was in New York, correct?
Yeah.
Did you feel a lot of pressure? I mean, I feel like with the British accent, you could just get away with saying whatever you wanted, and people would just assume you're prim and proper. Is that not true? Is that not true?
No. You're not wrong. It does actually help out quite a lot. It is a little bit of a power. But then you have other international kids, and you sort of lose your special, special status.
Fair. Okay, so you kind of are coming in. You're working those like kind of long hours at first.
Yeah.
Did you feel that there was, I don't know, how do I say it? Like there was anything special about it to get the offer? Was the return offer rate really high? So out of how many kids were in the credit?
Yeah, for credit risk, at least the return rate was pretty high. And I have noticed that when I was working at LevFin, it was the same thing where 90% plus would get a return offer. It really was more of a, it's yours to lose rather than yours to win.
Okay.
Because I think that the interview process and the recruiting process itself is so hard that they sort of wean out anyone who sort of gets to that point. Probably has enough to get it, like probably has enough to experience or skill to actually do the job.
Let's reverse then back to the internship. So you win the case competition. Was the interview process still very difficult, or did you feel like they wanted you? It wasn't.
No. My interview was, they literally told me in the first 2 minutes, this is a formality. The case comp was kind of an interview, and they thought that was enough to give me the internship. So that's also why I say luck into it, because technically I really didn't have a formal internship interview.
Were the other people on your team also just granted offers? Or was it just you? Oh, it was just
me.
You.
It was me and one other kid got an offer.
And was that because you guys were the only people on you guys formed one team, or was it because they liked?
No, it was a team of 4 of us.
So they just liked you.
They liked me and the other kid. Yeah, they just liked us from that process.
Let's talk about that. Why?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
My money's on that. Me and the other kid and I think I don't remember his last name, but his first name was Andrew. When we were talking, we were typically a little more outspoken. When we did, and it was sort of like it was not only just analysis. It was we had to present the case as well, and I don't quite remember the exact case. I think it was a standard finance case where it's like, here's a company, do you buy, do you sell, valuation, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I just think that we, presented the case and the material, in a, for lack of better phrasing, educated setting. We were able to speak to the points well.
The other kids not talk? Were they quiet?
They spoke less. Okay. And I don't think, I mean, if I was to put my resume up against theirs, and I don't remember too well, but I don't think anything at the time would have been like, oh, that kid's better. Like all of our resumes at the time were
strong.
We were all the same. Like there was like, oh, this guy has like a much higher GPA. It's like, no, we're all really much the same spot. I just think it was in the presenting part of it, the 2 of us sort of just stood up and said more. And I think that was what made them happy.
Was that planned beforehand, or was it more like the Q&A portion?
No, it was more Q&A.
So that's what matters, is on the cuff you guys could handle the questions and stuff like that. So it looked like you did a lot of the work because you knew companies, because you guys knew the companies better. And was that true? Did you guys do a lot of the work?
No, it was very split. I just think that I'm not one to, I'm one to always speak first.
Okay.
Even if I'm wrong, I don't necessarily mind being incorrect. I really don't mind. I just like to I like to answer. I like to ask more questions. I like to just be out and like, oh, what's this? Explain this, explain that. And I think they liked seeing that outgoingness rather than, even if, let's say, the heavy part of the lifting of the analysis was done by someone else. Unfortunately, it felt like if you spoke up more, even if you don't necessarily understand the material as well,
Yep.
that is a slight edge.
Fair. Okay. Thank you for that. Going
Yeah.
backwards. So we're back at the internship. You
Yes.
kind of are grinding. You're doing what type of work? Can you just give me a quick idea, like what the day was like for an intern there?
So in credit risk, most of the internship revolved around what they had, these things called like review packages. So we'd be looking over companies and the balance sheet debt that we had as a firm to them.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd be basically going, okay, writing up like a 15-ish page or 10 to 15 page package that was sort of a review of the company, its financials, writing out its credit risks, its credit strengths. Where do we see problems coming down the road? Where do we not? That sort of thing. And that was one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it.
So are you looking at covenants and like where they make ratios, all that stuff?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And sort of going over legal documents and taking a look at the company, like, all right, they have a 2 times or 3 times coverage ratio. Given the company performance, is that fair? Is it not? Should we make it tighter? Is it okay to give them a little bit of breathing room because they're looking to take on more debt? Like that sort of analysis and that sort of work.
Okay, fair. Sorry, continue. So like you were doing those review packets as an intern? You were helping?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we had oversight from an actual employee. But
who's actually reviewing those? Like
the associate, and then we would have sign off. We'd have to then present them to the ED.
The executive director.
Yeah.
And they would then do what with that work?
So the package itself, and I don't know how much I can get into because it's sort of talking about JP Morgan practices.
No, sorry. So you don't have to.
No, it's fine.
You can talk about, just tell me like what was the end goal? Is it to be able to give advice to like the
Yeah, so we would work side by side with the front office teams.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, you guys want to pitch X, Y, and Z. We're not comfortable as a bank.
Got it. Here's how much. Okay, so
here's how much as a bank we're not comfortable, or we are comfortable doing. That sort of thing.
Then they'd argue with you, be like, we're gonna
100%.
You're gonna 100% the deal. What the hell is wrong with you guys? Like,
that's a very familiar.
You're a bunch of
statement. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of how it went.
That's what I would expect.
There's
a lot of money at stake, huge fees at stake. These bankers in front office are probably going to push you guys to go as far as as you can. And there's that tension, that healthy tension, I'll call it.
Healthy tension. Let's put it that way. Okay.
So you're going through this as you're going through the internship. Are you thinking this is my career? This is what I want to do long term? Or you're thinking, hey, this would be good to take some pressure off my parents, get a full-time offer and get some money.
Yeah, more of that. Definitely not. I never thought of it as sort of a long-term career.
By the way, are your parents now in the were they in the US at that point, or were they still in the UK?
They had just moved back to America.
Okay.
Yeah.
Around you? Did you have family?
No, they're in North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, they love it there.
Okay, fair enough. So you're going through this. You're kind of thinking, let's just get the offer. You get the offer. What does that feel like? Do you feel good about it? Or are you kind of like?
Yeah. No, I feel great about it. I mean, besides the fact that it's your first time seeing a number, like a salary number that high, like that in itself was like, wow, that's shocking.
What was it, if you want to share? I think 80K or.
Yeah, I want to say first year analyst was 80.
Yeah. And so do they give you a sense of bonus potential for this?
Yeah. So at least it's changed dramatically since then. But when I started, we were tied with the front office as well. We were all pulled in the same bucket. But I know that our bonuses weren't.
Okay.
Like our salary was tied to theirs and our bonuses were haircutted. They weren't haircutted much, but they were haircutted compared to the front office analysts.
Like 50% of what they got? Because they would get a front office
first year was going to get like
80 plus at least like 50 or 60 sometimes.
Yeah, if they're top bucket, they'll get like 50, 60. Yeah.
50, 60. So
yeah, and our top bucket, I think, was around 40-ish for first year.
Okay, that's still.
Yeah. So we were pretty, like, I don't know. I think compared to most of the street credit risk at JP Morgan, again, when I was there, it's changed insanely since then. Was tied.
And cut significantly? Or?
Yeah. They've changed payment structures. They've trying to reorg how it operates. I think it's in the news that they're starting to shift the credit risk jobs to different cities. They're sort of like they're trying to so they're trying to just cut costs where they can. The function itself still works, and they're not like trying to reduce it for regulatory purposes, but it felt like when I was sort of in the transition of leaving that they've changed the priority of the role to sort of become more of a regulatory role. And so a lot of analysts who went in as sort of like I did and a few others did, where it's like, oh, you didn't get front office jobs, do credit risk for a year and jump over. As people noticed it was becoming a lot more regulatory focused, kids were like, I don't even want to take the risk of going to credit risk on the off chance that I get siloed so far away.
It can pigeon you, or even worse, your job is somewhere else outside of New York.
Exactly.
You have no chance to network and actually get another job.
Yeah, networking from a different city would be very hard.
It can be done, but we've seen it done many times on Wall Street Oasis, but it makes life so much easier. It's funny on this other podcast we're launching soon called Monkey to Millions. I'm mentoring 4 kids, now 3 kids. And one of them is a freshman. She's a freshman at Fordham, actually.
Oh, wow. No way.
And I'm just like, you have such an advantage being in New York.
It does help. It really helps a lot.
And she's a freshman. So I'm like, you have like, she actually doesn't have a ton of time given how crazy accelerated things are, but she already had an internship lined up for next.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Next time I'm like, you're
fine.
I'm like, this is done. We're done with you.
No more mentoring. You're good.
So, okay. Yeah. That's actually really helpful that kind of trend, that shift. I hadn't heard that in terms of credit risk and how they're doing it. I have heard a little bit about the moving more of the staff to regional cities, and, Goldman has the Salt Lake City office, stuff like that. So, makes sense that other firms are following suit. So, okay. So you're getting to this, you get the offer. It's a huge salary for some kids who've never been paid anything coming out of college. You're psyched. Yeah. You go into now what is
senior year
with a job in hand. It's a party.
Yep.
It's a blast.
It made senior year a lot more relaxed.
And then you graduate, and then reality hits. You start coming into work. And tell me about that. Is it long hours? Is it still like the 70, 80 hours? Is it that crazy?
I was in TMT in my internship. So technology, media, telecom. And I transitioned into hedge fund and asset managers in between. So my first day there, it was an entirely different team that I'd internship with. So that was sort of in itself quite different. I interviewed with them and like checked the boxes, but that process itself of, all right, it's a new team. I haven't been with you for 8 weeks. It's sort of, I'm still feeling everyone out. And that team, unfortunately, was worse hours. Like the TMT was around 70-ish. These were like, I'm working, I think my first year, I worked pretty much every weekend. And it was credit risk. It wasn't front office. So that was sort of just I'm very confused when I showed up, getting that kind of experience.
So you were doing plus hours a week, pretty consistent.
Yeah. And I felt that the job itself was good for the first year. Like it really was a good experience. Like you learned a hell of a lot about how companies operate, how to analyze a company truly in depth and actually understand cash flows. We got to look a lot about
the balance sheet. It sounds kind of similar to restructure. I was in restructuring at Rothschild.
Okay. Got you. Okay.
Yeah. I understood like all the crazy debt structures and from my side, we would see companies like going like this, like trying all this crazy stuff going on. But I'm sure you saw some crazy structures too and some weird debt.
Yeah. I think after about a year, and that sort of it had a big turnover rate. Especially on my team, which was a FIG team, where it's less corporate finance. It's a little bit more unique and nuanced. Like I dealt with BDCs and private equity firms rather than like a Nike. So it had a very different cash flow structure and a very different way of approaching them. Yeah, and very different sort of how you look at them from a legal perspective. The legal documents are entirely different because the covenants you would apply don't really apply to a FIG company. It doesn't match up.
Where's your revenue?
Literally, it's like, oh yeah, it's here. That doesn't make sense. But after about a year, one of my other buddies actually left the team, and that got me into like, all right, maybe I should heavily consider moving. And that's sort of what led me into LevFin. It's a pretty natural progression. A lot of LevFin analysts.
LevFin front office.
Yeah, LevFin front office. There's a big pool of credit risk people who transition into LevFin.
I assume that's tough though. Is it probably every single credit analyst trying to make the LevFin?
Yes.
Especially from your group, even you're already working the hours.
Yes. The only helpful thing that I will say is because you're working credit risk, you work on a lot of debt products.
Yeah.
So we work quite close in hand with LevFin as a whole.
Yeah. So it's an easy.
So you are building network by being in that role. You're building a network with your LevFin counterparts. So that
How
makes
would
the
you
transition
say,
a little easier.
what's the key for people who are internally want to make that move?
Network.
Well, yeah, network obviously.
100%. Like that's all of it.
That's all of it. But like, how often are you bothering? Like, so you're already working with the LevFin
Fair.
team. So like, are you like just going into the office of like some MD on LevFin and just popping down for a coffee, or like how are you approaching it so that you don't annoy them and don't seem like a tryhard?
That's a really good point. I can
How
speak
did
to
you
my own.
do it? How did you do it
Yeah.
naturally?
So my own experience with it was I worked on an LBO of an asset manager um, like a few months before I left.
Yep.
Worked with the associate quite closely, a lot of long nights, a lot of meetings. So I didn't go after some MD or ED who, as you put it, don't want to bug them, don't want to come as a tryhard. And also, MDs and EDs are very busy.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily like being bugged by someone so junior. So I used the associate and was like, hey, I'm interested in transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a rapport with him through the process and through the deal. And he was happy to help out. And then he was like, all right, here's a couple analysts I want you to get in touch with. So he gave me a couple of names on his team. And it's sort of like I just met back and forth with like 4 or 5 of his his analysts on his team. And then he sort of let me know, he's like, all right, there's a job opening in a month, apply for that one. I've already got the support of him and like 2 other analysts, and they can then, when my resume comes through, and I learned all of this when I went to LevFin and saw the process in reverse. But at the time, it was just sort of like, I was told,
It was a
we'll
black
help.
box.
Yeah, it's like, I have no idea what's going on. I'll give you my resume. Hopefully it gets in the right hands and it gets sort of put on the pile that's
But again,
actually getting looked at
it's just
properly.
who you know, and you had that
Yeah,
one buy-in from that one associate that kind of told you, okay, well now go talk to these 4 people,
exactly.
because if I have a couple more people supporting you on the whole
Yeah,
team, it's done. You're basically
exactly.
okay.
I don't know if you want me to get into, because I did his role when I was in LevFin for another credit analyst. So I
Yeah,
know the exact opposite.
yeah, it'd be good
And
to hear that.
what I noticed when the roles were flipped was that, I mean, there was an analyst opening and it was like a stack of 200 plus resumes.
Right.
And how do you wean that down? Like, how do you even get the time to wean that down? Especially when, if you look at all the resumes, about 100 of them have 3.8s, 3.9s, 4.0s.
Mm-hmm.
So then how do you wean down these top tier candidates? And then you got like a bunch of them are Ivy Leagues and a bunch of them it's just like, how do you even approach trying to get the list down to even conduct interviews? And that's where that associate vouchers for that one kid, or that MD's like, he went to my school. And that's when the networking really comes into play, is that.
But do you feel like the kids on the outside have an advantage over the internal transfers? Like, because you were going to go reset and go back to first year analysts, right?
I did reset and go back to first year
You have
analyst.
to, right? They force you to.
Yep.
Because they know
I
you
know.
want it. They know they can force
Yep.
you to do that.
They have all the leverage at hand to make you do it.
So yet even with that, every single credit analyst wants to get it to LevFin or any front office job. And so they all apply. Plus you have just the crazy amount of applications from externally coming in.
Yep. Yeah.
It's for a lateral role? Or no, it's for a first year analyst role.
Yeah, I guess it's lateraling in the sense of you're moving within the bank, but it was resetting yourself to a first year.
No, but like I'm saying, those 200 resumes you're talking about, that like, how do you even cut through all of that?
Yeah.
Is that for just looking at the people
internally? That was for internal and external. There was like internal 200, and then they did a first wave process of internal, and then they opened it up to external as well, and it was again another nice chunk of resumes.
But then how did you end up in? How many did they bring over? Just one?
So I did the process with another guy on my exact team, which we then got our old team kind of got in trouble for, because they got mad that LevFin was stealing people, because there was 2 of us in the exact like month after month. But it was like, there was 4 analyst openings in LevFin across the 3 different groups. And it was 800 resumes. And they weaned it down to like, I think the first set of interviews was maybe 40 kids.
Okay.
And so again, it's sort of like, if
it's still
you don't go to,
even if you get selected for the first.
Yeah. And it's like, if you don't have that associate or that VP or that ED to be like, oh, he went to my school, great. Or if you've not networked with them, there is a high likelihood that your resume never even get looked at. Like, even if you submit it,
yeah,
there still is a big chance that the staffer doesn't have the time downloads like 50 of the resumes and says, okay, here, we'll start with this stack, and we won't even get to that stack. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think it's an important lesson. It's who you know, always.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. Unfortunately. It really is
Okay.
unfortunate.
It is. It is. Do you think it's going to always be like that? Or do you think like technology is going to eventually be able to like do something? Because a resume is just a piece of paper. I mean, there's those
Yeah.
higher view. Have you heard of those video interviews, the higher views?
Yeah.
It's like
I
trying to
haven't done
read
that
your
yet.
facial cues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're what kind of person? I don't know if I buy it, but it's kind of interesting.
I don't know if it will transition in
Our lifetime.
yeah, because I feel like people are too comfortable with that setting, and also it's still a personal business. You still have to have connections with other human beings, and so
Agreed.
the networking word, it's not going away. People are always going to network, and
They're always going to like hiring people they like.
exactly. Like, how would you be like, oh, there's that candidate who I don't know who's got a fantastic resume, and that candidate who I know has got a good resume, but I know him personally.
So tell me about this interview process internally. So you get in, you're one of those 40 kids initially selected for
Yeah.
and does your credit team know about this yet, or how is it like? Is it just,
My manager does, not my whole team. I spoke to him. I
were
gave
you
him a heads
expected
up.
to give it? Yeah, were you told to give him a heads up, or did you just do that on your own?
I did that on my own because I had a good rapport with my manager at the time.
Okay.
But I was then told in the interview process, actually at the end of it, to be like, we're going to call, once it was all like done, we're going to call your manager for feedback. Does he know? So I would advise, if there's people who are lateraling or trying to get into these jobs and you have a manager, just read the room. If your manager is very comfortable and you like them, please give them a heads up, because they definitely don't want to get a phone call out of the blue and get like completely side like out of the like, oh, I'm what? He's leaving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it wasn't necessarily forced.
Okay. So luckily he was supportive.
Yes, luckily.
And you make the transition. And is
Yeah.
it very different now? You get into the LevFin group. Is it similar work or more interesting or more modeling? What's it like?
It's more interesting for sure. I think I mentioned earlier on, while I was there near the end, the credit role was transitioning into sort of a regulatory focus. So while in the beginning it was a lot of corporate finance, by the end I was doing a lot more admin, regulatory related work. So my load of actually working on companies and how they operate started to dwindle. So when I transitioned over, it was a nice refresher. Okay, I'm actually working on companies, understanding them, figuring them out, that kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay.
But I think the biggest transition for me was from LevFin, or in LevFin, was there was a lot of capital markets work that I had no exposure to before. And in the interview process, they actually asked me about it, and I told them, I was like, I'll be honest with you guys, I have no idea about anything to do with capital markets, but it's a big reason why I want to come on the team, because I don't have that knowledge and I really want that knowledge.
Okay. So what did you feel like? Was it a really steep learning curve again, like when you joined, or did you?
The quote unquote the deal material, where it's like a company comes in, analyze its cash flows, model it out, pitch the company, go back and forth, create a deck. That stuff wasn't actually that much of a learning curve. That was just sort of the credit, and I think that's why the credit risk role lends itself to people going to LevFin right after, because that part of it was kind of very similar. It was the capital market stuff for me, where it was, pitching bonds and pitching loans at certain price points and understanding the interest rates. That stuff for me was brand new, and that's where I had, I think, the hardest learning curve to get over.
How would you say people should prep for that? Is there any way to prep for that?
I mean, I tried. It didn't help too much, but they also fully expect it, which was nice. Like, the team was very aware that it is a very different way of thinking about things, and so they don't expect you to have that knowledge coming in. So they gave you a lot of time to sort of figure it out. I would say what helped for me was, this typical Wall Street Journal, looking at like bonds and trying to read the economy and looking at interest rates and trying to really understand the relationship between the debt markets and the economy, and how if one changes, the other one goes. I did also have a really good friend at the time who was in research, so I bugged him a hell of a lot with all of my questions to try and be like, help me understand markets better. But again, most of the learning was done on the job.
Cool. Okay. So you're kind of there. You're still working long hours, I assume.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
Was it worse? Was it even longer hours?
So it was very sporadic. Coverage definitely had it worse from whenever I worked with them on deals. They had it so much worse. But I would have, let's say, 1 week would be 60. I was like,
Yeah.
this is awesome. But I had no idea going in it would be a 60-hour week.
Right.
And the next week was 90.
Yeah.
And the next week was 105. And then it was 70. It was just, there was so little consistency in it all that I couldn't go in on a Monday being like, I know how my week's going to pan out.
Right.
I think that was the biggest struggle, mainly because we had so many pitches or last minute requests.
Yeah. Tell me
And
about that,
then,
like the pitch to actual live deal ratio.
yeah. So,
Was it, you get some good transaction experience on your resume?
yeah, I did quite a few. I think also when I did show up, it was a pretty hot time in the market for issuing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say half my time was pitch work and
Okay.
half the time was deal. And again, that would transition with how the market was flowing at the time. But
Right.
and when you're working on deal stuff, it wasn't just working on one deal. Typically, you had 2 or 3 deals at a time to work on. Plus, you had like 3 or 4 pitch decks to work on, which that's where the hours really came in.
Got a little crazy.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Super fun, right?
Yeah, it's brutal. So you're kind of you'd already done a full year in credit risk. You're now
Yeah.
kind of, let's say you're finishing up your first year. You get your first bonus. Is the first bonus nice, at least after putting in a brutal year? You getting a good
Yeah.
6K?
First year in credit risk, getting that bonus was really nice.
Yeah.
I've
Do you
I
mind
think I
sharing what it
was
was?
yeah, I was an M plus. I don't know if that means anything. It's
No.
like a uh
Oh, like your performance?
middle of the pack is an M, or like middle of the pack was that. I wasn't the top bucket. I was like
M plus.
between middle and yeah, I was between middle and top bucket.
Sounds like
I
me.
think my first year I think my first year was 34, 35, and then my second year I ended up in the same spot and I got 50,
Yeah.
and then I transitioned over to LevFin. So that was getting a bonus definitely helps a lot. I think one thing that all of us did as a group, which I don't advise any people who are currently in finance doing, is to calculate your hourly wage. It just makes you depressed as hell. It just really ruins your mood.
Oh my
Because you
gosh.
have friends who work in other industries working a nice 9 to 5, and they make way more than you on hourly wage.
Yeah, that's funny. Don't do that for all the listeners out there.
Yeah, it just hurts.
Yeah, you can't look at I see it as really a learning experience. So tell me, so
It is.
obviously, it's not sustainable to keep working at this rate,
Yeah,
for all the modes, unless maybe the people who just love the work and just see
yeah,
themselves of lifetime bankers or
yeah.
BFLs, um, would put up with it. But tell me, like, when did you start thinking of, hey, I need to change gears, or I'm looking to do something?
Yeah.
Tell me when
So
that started creeping into your head and kind of what you looked at. Do you look at
yes.
private equity? What was the thought process?
So it's a little bit mixed up with the whole tennis thing, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I sort of, before even getting the LevFin job, um, I was in a transition period of, all right, do I stay in banking another year, improve the resume, or do I quit now and just start playing tennis?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, the way I thought about it was my resume showed credit risk. It didn't show front office. It showed credit risk at JP Morgan. The name itself was good, but the fact that it was lacking front office would mean that, if and when I do come back to the financial world after tennis, it doesn't help. It's not as impactful as, let's say, oh, I got to work in a front office role. I worked in
And
LevFin.
I 100% agree. You're super smart to do those 2 years of
So
brutal.
yeah, so I was
Now people
like,
know you can take it,
exactly. So probably the biggest reason why I transitioned to LevFin was it was for me, it's my plan B.
Hmm.
I knew going into LevFin, I was going to quit after a year and a half, or whatever it was, to go play tennis. I
Okay.
just wanted to have that experience to learn what I wanted to learn, have it on the resume, because if I'm being frankly honest, I'm 26 trying to pursue a career as a professional athlete.
You have
The
another like
odds
six
the
years.
odds aren't really in my favor. The odds are super stacked against me. So I tried to be like, all right, if I'm being just realistic, getting that resume experience, getting that, job experience, getting the network and the connections that I built through the LevFin position. If I do come back to finance in 3, 4, 5 years, or if I go back to private equity or try and go some other role, I do have, like you said, I have the proof that I was able to do it. And it just makes that transition a lot easier.
No, yeah, for sure. 100%. That makes a ton of sense. I think
Yeah.
it was really smart for you to get that front office gig. I can tell you,
Yeah.
you would be in super high demand if you were like, hey, I want to come back. And do you know how many
Yeah.
people want like experienced analysts with like 2 or
Yeah.
3 years? You would have no trouble.
Yeah.
There's tons of lateral positions at solid boutique banks that would give you a look, so even middle market or even bulge bracket,
Yeah.
with the proper networking. So, okay. So you kind of had this plan. Did your team know that you were kind of going to end it?
So actually, funny enough, my credit risk manager knew.
Okay.
So I was close with him. My team didn't know until about my last 6 months, and then I told my staffer. As we spoke, I think we mentioned it really early on. When they hire you and they make you a first year, they have all the cards to hand because they know you want to transfer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to risk my chances of not even getting in the position by being like, hey, I'm going to dip in a year.
Right. Makes sense. So you you walked into your staffers meeting, you say, hey, I'm going to go play professional tennis. How did that go?
Actually, my leaving went really well. I had like full support from my entire team. Everyone was super happy. It was a nice it was a nice experience versus, and I feel bad for all of my other friends who left LevFin after a year or two, and they had a really crappy experience in leaving.
Why? Why was that? Why was it such a bad experience for people?
For them, it was sort of a lot of the senior folks believed that it was a longer than a year commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And so people who left before 2 year mark, they just sort of said, and especially if they left to private equity or credit funds or whatever, they just were upset that they sort of put the time and the effort into training them, and then they left after a year.
So they basically be screaming at you like, "You're dead to me. You're dead to me."
Yeah, you can go that way. It's some form. It's basically some form of that.
Got it. So they were supportive. So tell me about that first day not going into the office. Well, first
So
off,
nice.
actually, before,
So nice.
tell
Yeah.
me about, like, had you been training at all? Had you been playing tennis at all through this whole year, like,
So
gauntlet?
yeah. So
Real quick, I think your mic might be unplugged a little bit. There's a little bit of feedback or.
how about now? Any better?
Yeah, I think it might be your internet connection. It's fine. I can hear you fine. I think it's coming through okay. But so continue.
Okay.
So tell me about, like, were you training during the? I don't think you need to hold it. I think it's just the connection,
Okay.
the internet connection. But
Got you. Yeah. So I was training before I left. Before I left credit, I was starting to train. Unfortunately, what a desk job will do to you quite quickly is it will ruin your body. And so within my first 2 months of training, I got hurt,
mm-hmm.
and I spent about a year and a half just going through rehab and getting into shape and getting back into it and that whole 9 yards. And so
What
I
did you?
think
How'd you get hurt? What did you do? Like tear an ACL or something?
no, thank God, that would be awful. It was actually sort of a weird injury. I got tendonitis in my knees, and then I forget the exact medical phrase, but long story short, my left hip just sort of lost muscle control
Oh,
from, I guess, sitting all day long. And so it was just a compounding of like, I wasn't able to control my left hip very well. And
wait
so
till
my
you're
knees got
39 like me,
fried.
man. Wait till you're 39.
Yeah,
Everything gets really
my
painful.
body is going to.
Your body's gonna be a mess, dude, after playing how much tennis you're playing.
But yeah, so I spent about a year and a half just getting through that injury. I will say that I had to quit because I would have loved to have stayed working and practiced and trained because I would have had money coming in rather than where I am right now.
Yeah.
But I could only do the physical. Like I was in the gym, like let's say my work day was 8 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
I would get up and I'd work out from like 5 to 7, go to work, and then I'd work out again from like 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 and go back to the office. So that was my sort of my
You
time
do
in
2 a
LevFin. Yeah, my time in LevFin, I would like not my first few months because I was just getting the new role, but after a few months, I was doing a morning workout and then an evening one, or
days.
I'd go play tennis and come back to the office or work from home and log in. But I realized that I wasn't really able to get more than 5, 6 hours a week at the absolute most while working.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had to quit because there was no way I could make both work. Otherwise, I would have loved it. I could have gotten paid, close like low six figures and trained at the same time and been great. Financially, I would be in amazing shape.
Yeah. So okay, so you're basically going through all this. You quit, you get a little
Yep.
injury, you're dealing through that, you're rehabbing. Tell me how's it going right now?
It's going well. I fortunately again I managed to get injured, which is I guess part of the whole
You got
transitioning
injured
from
again?
like, yeah, different part of the body. Got my shoulder this time.
Okay.
But I'm on the court 2 hours a day. I'm working out 3 hours, 3 hours, and like including of rehab as well as like weights.
Mm-hmm.
Hoping to play my first tournament, my professional tournament, March, April. Um, but I think the biggest struggle that I've had is having a job where you got about, 2.5, 3 grand a paycheck every 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
to now just having negative and just a bank account just continuing to go down.
So what's the
That
plan?
is
How
a
are you going to
very
fund it?
fun transition.
How
Well,
are you?
partly working with you guys.
Yeah.
I have a variety of odd jobs that I do on the side.
Yeah.
I tutor. I'm working part-time with my cousin in his resale business.
I got
Do
it.
stuff for you guys. I string rackets.
Yeah.
But those are all just sort of temporary ones to help. The plan is sort of play the first few tournaments, get a few wins under the belt, and then use both the network that I have built in finance over the years in New York, as well as the network I'm building down here to, help get sponsorships and sort of work me through that. Because as of right now, it's just sort of I'm burning my own savings.
Yep.
And that's sort of the plan going in was to do that. There was no other way to go about it.
Yeah.
But I will eventually need to have sponsorships who can help support, because I can't make enough money on the side as a part-time role to offset the burn, like my expense burn on a day-to-day basis.
So tell me a little bit about, are there any programs? I'd be curious to hear. So I know obviously like most athletes are just sponsored, right?
Yeah.
And so the goal is to get up to a certain level where they want to sponsor you because you have enough exposure and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any program similar to have you heard of these things where college students will like sell a future part of their income? Is there anything where athletes can sell a future
They're
part of their
actually,
income?
it's funny you mentioned that. I want to say NPR or I think I heard of Freakonomics.
Yeah.
One of those guys had a podcast literally on a company doing this.
Yeah.
And I reached out to that company if they would do it for tennis players. Because right now I think they do baseball and I want to say football, and they do grad school kids where they have like a pooled income and like, payout if one person does really well to sort of help make it so much less of a home run chance.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't mention they have tennis, but I did reach out because I was just like, any chance you're interested in doing tennis players? This would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the same sort of economics where it's like if you do get to the top 50 or top 100 in the world,
You're getting paid.
What are you
well.
getting paid? A couple million a year?
No. Depends. If you are a marketable brand, you could be top 100 and make a couple mil.
Yeah.
Like if you have a good presence, good sponsorship, you come from a unique country, you could sort of be that country's whatever. You probably be making $1 million range in sponsorship and prize money in the top 50. You probably start to.
That's so hard to get there.
Yeah, it's.
Where do you think you're going to get to?
The goal is 3 years to hit about 300 in the world, and that's sort of like my marker of, all right, let's evaluate. Should I keep pushing it? If I don't get to 300, maybe I wasn't quite good enough to make it. I would love to be in the top 10. I mean, God, that'd be fantastic. But I'm also trying to be realistic as I'm getting older. I have, age in my body plus finances to take into account. So it's sort of a seeing how the journey
I guess
goes.
Is that typical? Like for it to take 3 years to get? Where would you rank yourself now? I mean, you don't have any sense.
1,000.
Around 1,000. Okay.
Yeah, roughly 1,000. Because, and it does take quite a while. The beginning couple tournaments and like especially like the lower ranked tournaments is a huge grind, because you have not only do you have professional players who are 800 in the world or so, like that range of quality, you also have the top talents of juniors in the world who are also trying to break in. Then you have like Division 1 players who are on their break trying to play. So that whole like lower ranked tournament level of buckets,
huge variety.
It's just such a huge supply of these like very, very good players.
Yeah.
And as you get higher and higher, it's sort of, sure, the players are really good, but there's less of them.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier to sort of that first like few years is very hard to break through.
Hmm.
And then it's just a matter of repeating and repeating and repeating. That's
So,
all theory. I haven't done it yet, so I have no idea.
so you haven't done it because you just with the injuries you've been kind of set back
Yeah,
a few times?
my shoulder won't let me serve. I can't really play a tournament without serving. So I've just been training and training and training and getting into better shape.
So do you feel like what happens if your shoulders never recovers or you've re-injured
Thought
again?
about that would really suck. I think a big reason why I quit was because I just want to walk away from this entire experience being like,
You
I
went
know
for
I'm
it.
good enough. Yeah, I went for it. Am I good enough? Am I not good enough? Okay, at least I have an answer. So even if I do manage to get another bloody injury, um, I still think I would go through the rehab process of trying it one more time because I still have enough money to try it to keep going.
Yeah.
Um, but the signs, and I don't have any wood near me, but knock on wood, the signs are
I
looking good
will.
that this injury, yeah, it's looking good that it should be recoverable. The physical therapist thinks it's not going to be a problem.
Yep.
It's just a matter of
Did you
getting
injure
over
it
the hump.
serving?
No, I injured it sort of in my first few months after I quit, trying to get back into the sport. I was
Too
playing a little
fast.
bit more than I should have
Yeah.
daily,
Yeah.
and just you know, I used to play 4 hours a day when I was a kid, but I was a kid playing 4 hours a day every day for a few years. I quit a job not playing every day, so I just played too much too soon.
Yeah. Fair. It's like
Yeah.
you're excited to
Yeah,
get back
I was. You have
six
no idea
hours.
how. You have no idea how excited I was after I quit.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Like you
uh,
wake up, there's no alarm to wake you up or you're getting up
no
to,
alarm. It was great.
yeah.
I was super lazy for the first like few days. Didn't do anything. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Just hung out, saw my friends who have 9 to 5 jobs who get out decent hours. I saw
Yeah.
them, which was just it was fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
Um, and then yeah, after about a week, I started getting back into all right. Let's get the ball rolling. Let's next thing.
Hmm. And are your parents supportive of you or do they think you're crazy?
Very, very supportive. I lucked out very
That's
well with
awesome.
them. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's huge. A lot of people can't say that, in terms of having the support from their parents and stuff. It looks like you froze for a second here. All right, we're back. So
Cool. Sorry about
yes,
that.
so you had I just said it's really lucky you have your parents like that.
Yeah, no. They've been incredibly supportive and very happy. I have spoken with them and sort of, I quit as a junior because I just seeing the financial burden it put on them when I was a kid.
Yeah,
It's just not something you want to do to your family.
yeah,
So this time around, it's sort of like I'm doing my absolute best to sort of get outside money and not resort to family.
yeah.
Um, so it's been nice having a little bit of a I'm not entirely insane. I do have some people who think it's possible.
It's possible, man. I mean, if you feel like you have the talent and it sounds like you have the work ethic. And so a
Yeah.
lot of it's going to be grinding. I bet, there are a lot of grinders out there though, right? It comes
Sure.
down at some point, it comes down to like, it comes down to like
Yeah.
how hard you grind, but then also, technique. So much of it's like technique, but
Yeah.
you started young, right?
Yeah, but it's sort of if I'm comparing myself to other people pursuing it,
Yeah.
I'm average. I did the same thing. I did the same process. The
Yeah.
only thing that differentiates me from, let's say, another tennis player doing this is that I had a quote unquote 4 year gap working in finance. So if
Mm.
anything, that's a disadvantage in the
Yeah.
sense of my body is so not where it would be if I did 4 years. The last 4 years were training.
Fair. Fair. Well, talking to a lot of the listeners that are a little bit younger than yourself, maybe in college, do you have any advice for them kind of coming through as they
Yeah.
jobs?
If you're still in college, have fun with it. You know, it's the recruiting process is starting earlier and earlier. And yes, it's important to get the internship to help with the job, but you know, have that photography class, have that wine class, go have the extracurriculars. You'd be surprised, and I know it's hard to see it from the perspective of freshman or sophomore, that all of your resume needs to be I interned and I did finance and I did this and it's all economics. But you'd be surprised how many interviews that I conducted or was part of the in part of the room conducting it, where that one personal connection because that one kid did mountain biking or he was part of the ski club or
Right.
He does art on the side, and it's completely non-finance, where the VP was like, that's fantastic, I love you for it. And that personal connection got them the job, not because their resume was better than the other kids, but literally because their side passions in life got them the job.
Yeah, and it's so true. The interest sections are so massive.
It's
Actually,
so important. Yeah.
the same girl that I was talking about at Fordham, told her, I'm like, where are your interests? Like, she had like something generic in photography. I'm like, what type of photography?
Yeah.
And she's like, fashion photography. She's like, that got me like an interview. Somebody loved that. I had that on
right?
there.
Yeah.
Like, there you go. I think that's great advice.
Exactly.
I think that's great advice. Always have an interest section. It should be specific too. It shouldn't be some generic thing like traveling, where,
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
specific. So I think we'll end on that. I think it's
good.
a really cool story, man. I think
Thanks.
people will enjoy it. I think it's
Hopefully,
one, and I want to get an update from you. I'm going to be following you in your world ranking as it climbs from 1,000 up to 500 up to 300.
Yeah, right.
I think you're going to get there in 2 years, not 3.
That'd be great.
So
save me some money.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, man. Well, thanks for taking the time, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.